Hi, welcome back to Educator.com's AP Music Theory course. Today's lesson is on secondary dominants and secondary leading tone chords. So the objectives for this lesson, first we're just going to look at secondary function chords, secondary dominants, and leading tones, and just learn to spell them and label them and just see which one goes with which diatonic chord. And then after that, we're going to integrate the secondary chords into the four-part harmonic progression writing that we've been doing. So let's look at dominants and secondary dominants. So we know what a dominant chord is, of course. For instance, if we're in the key of C major, we know that 5 is the dominant of that key, which means that, I'll just write the bass line, that it's the chord that leads us back to the tonic and confirms the key that we're in and gives us this sense of tension and release. So, of course, this is, and I'll write the whole progression here. So here is a dominant chord of the key that we're in, but now we'll see that we can use other chords in the key to be dominants of the other degrees. And that's why they're called secondary dominants, because they're not the primary dominant of the key, but they can lend this same sense of kind of tension and release and what we call tonicization to other scale degrees. So let's just go up a step. So let's say we have, we're still in C, remember. So this is the second degree of C, which is D. And normally, if we were to keep all these chords diatonic, this would, of course, be a minor 6 chord. But what we can do now is we can turn it into a dominant, which would mean, let's see, so C, A, E, back to F, A, D. So here is this progression spelled diatonically. And now if you want to make this a dominant, of course, what it means is we need to make this A minor chord a major chord, which requires a C sharp. So now this progression is basically analogous to this one in that it's this 1-5-1 progression happening on the second degree of C major. And so for the Roman numerals for this chord, we would borrow from here where we have the 5, but we would call it, oops, I just wrote 4. So now it's a 5 as well, but it's a 5 of 2. So this is the correct Roman numeral labeling for this secondary dominant. So let's do another one. What about if we're going to the 5 chord in C major? So we're in C, and we're starting with 5. And so we want to go to the dominant of 5, which would be a 5th above G, which is D, and then back to G. So G, B, D. And of course, diatonically, this would be this D minor chord that we saw up here. But if I'm now making this a secondary dominant, I need this to be a D major chord, which means that it's now using the same logic that we used above, 5 of 5. And of course, these chords can also be used in inversion, so the same 5 of 5 can be in first inversion, so 5, and it's labeled accordingly, 5, 6 of 5, 5. And remember to use the alter tone, so G, F sharp, G, and I'll write in the rest of the progression, G, B, D, and then F sharp, D, A, D, back to G, B, D. And finally, of course, we can also introduce the 7th to make them secondary dominant 5/7. So for instance, if we're going to use, what if we're going to have a chord be a secondary dominant in C major that's already major. Like for instance, what if we want to do 5 of 4? So I'll do it up here. So the 4th degree in C is F, so this is a F major chord, and we want to find the dominant, so it's a 5th up, which is C, and then go back to F. And so this chord is already major, so if we want to make it sound like a dominant, we've got to add the 7th. So what I want to do is F, A, C, and then going to, let's see, should we do this? E, G, B flat now for the 5-7, and then resolving to F, A, and we've got a tripled root here. So accordingly, you can probably guess the labeling for this is 5-7 of 4. And so this really is the way to make a secondary dominant on a chord that would already be major diatonically, like for instance the 1 chord here. Okay, and by the same logic, we can find secondary leading tone chords. So remember, leading tone chords are the diminished and fully diminished 7th chords in keys. So let's go to a minor key now. So what if we're in A minor? And of course, diatonically, we have a fully diminished 7th on, let's see, where is it? Here, on the 7th degree, on the raised 7th degree, I should say. So 1, and then 7, fully diminished 7, back to 1. So we have G sharp, B, D, F, back to A, C, E. And so what's happening, and actually, one thing to remember is that I can have these parallels moving up because I'm moving to a diminished chord and not a chord with a perfect 5th in it. So now, by the same logic, we can find fully diminished 7ths of other degrees. So what if we're on the 3rd degree of A minor? So we're going to be on C major. And now we can write in the same bass progression. And now we just need to find the accidentals that will make this a fully diminished 7th chord. So we have a B, and then let me write the C major chord first. Let's see, C, E, G. I'll write it up here. So we need B, D, F, B, D, F, and then an A flat, which is what will give us the fully diminished 7th. And then resolve that tritone in to an E and a G. Let's see. So again, using the same logic, this is going to be a 7, fully diminished 7 of 3, back to 3. And let's do one more of those. What about if we want to find the fully diminished 7th of 5 in A minor? So if we're in A and we're on the 5 chord, which is going to be major, of course. So E, G sharp, B, and now we're going to move down a half step. Remember, it's important that the bass is always moving down by a half step, so it's going to move to D sharp, and this is of course going to be labeled a 5 fully diminished 7th of, or sorry, a 7 fully diminished 7 of 5. So we've got D sharp, and then we have F sharp, and then A, and then C. And then this is going to resolve back to this 5 chord. Okay, now that we're more familiar with these secondary dominants and secondary leading tones, we can introduce them into our harmonic progressions. So with what we saw before, you should be able to find the secondary dominant or secondary leading tone on every chord, every diatonic chord in a major or minor key. So let's start with a basic progression. So what if we are just going to do 1, 4, 5, 1. So this is our basic tonic harmony, and then 4, which is of course subdominant, and then 5, which is dominant, and then back to tonic. And let's make the upper voices for this. So remember, I'm going to keep common tones and move the other voices as closely as possible. Except when I move from 4 to 5, I'm going to introduce contrary motion with the bass, and then back to tonic. So now we can think of secondary dominant chords in one sense as embellishing progressions. So where are some opportunities here that I might introduce a secondary dominant? Well, one place is between the 1 and the 4. I could go to a 5, 7 of 4. So let's write that into the progression. So, and it's always important to start with the bass line first. So I know that the bass line is going to stay on C, and then I'll label it accordingly. So 5, 7 of 4. And remember, I'm using 5, 7 because the C major is already a major chord. So to make it a secondary dominant, really need to add the 7th, and then to 4, and to 5 and 1. So, and I'll use the same voice arrangement to begin. And now, of course, what I need is the 7th, which is a B flat. So I'll take this C down to B flat so I can keep my complete chord. And now the B flat, the 7th, resolves down to A, and the G resolves down to F, and the E resolves up to F. And then this similarly, let's move this to a 5, 7 as well. So we can keep the F here, and then the A moves up to B, and the F moves down to D. And then resolving the 7th here, and the leading tone here, and then the D moving up to E. Okay, and now let's embellish this one step further with one more secondary dominant. So we added 1 here in between 1 and 4. And what if we add 1 here between 4 and 5? So now our new bass line is going to be, let's see, 1, 5, 7 of 4, and then 4, and then 5 of 5, and then 5, and then 1. So for the first part, I can just copy what we did above. So G, B flat, E, to F, A, F. And now we're moving to the 5 of 5, which is a D major chord in this key. So we need to chromaticize this F to an F sharp to give us D major. And here's the rest of the harmony. And now resolving this to a 5 the way any dominant resolves. So the leading tone up to the tonic, and then B, D. And resolving this in a similar fashion. So now we see that we've introduced these 2 secondary dominant chords into this basic 1, 4, 5, 1 progression. And a final step that we can introduce is using these chords in an inversion to lend a little bit more life and variety to the bass line. So now we can draw on some of the previous lessons that we've had. So let's look at this. So we've got this C and then repeating C to an F. So one thing I can do is make this 5, 7 of 4 in first inversion, which would give me this bass line, moving up to an E, which moves a half step to F. So of course having the 3rd in the bass means that this 5, 7 of 4 is in first inversion. So now it's a 5, 6, 5, a 4, going to a 4. And what if I think about doing the same thing with this 5, a 5 here? So what happens is that the third is in the bass, which turns out to be really nice because I get this F moving to an F sharp in the bass and then to the G and the C. So this is another 5, 6, a 5 to 5 to 1. And I'm not going to write the upper voices because really I just wanted to demonstrate that the bass line here is much more interesting, and this is a really great use of first inversion chords using secondary dominance. This progression, especially where you have this F sharp that comes in between the 4 and the 5, is a very common thing to see. And if you're harmonizing bass lines and you see this motion, this is always going to be the 5, 6 of 5. Okay, and now let's do a progression with secondary leading tone chords. So let's be in A minor and start with a basic progression. So what if we are going to start on A and then go down to F, D, E, and back to A. So we're just going to have a 1, 6, 4, 5, 1. And just as a review, again, I'm keeping common tones and moving the other voices as closely as possible. So F major, and then this is D minor, so I'm going to lead the C up to the D, and now to E major. So remember the 5 is always major. Let's see, D, B, E, and back to 1. So now let's do the same thing we did in the previous progression, where we now embellish this progression with secondary leading tone chords. So what if we add 1 to the 6 chord here first? So I can kind of sneak in what the new bass line is going to be. So it's going to be a half step below. So this E is going to be here. And then let's add 1 to the D as well. So I'm going to have this C sharp here. So let's write our new bass line. So it's A, E, F, C sharp, D, and then let's add 1 between the D and the E as well. So again, it's going to have this familiar D sharp motion, E, and A. So there's our new bass line, and I'll write the new progression down here just so we have more room. So A, E, F, C sharp, D, D sharp, E, and back to A. So again, these are these leading tone chords that are resolving up a half step to their tonicized chord. So now I can write in the Roman numerals. So 1, and this is going to be 7 diminished 7 of 6, going to 6, of course. This is going to be 7 fully diminished 7 of 4, going to 4. And this is going to be 7 fully diminished 7 of 5, going to 5, and then back to 1. So I just need to know what notes these chords have. So it's a fully diminished 7th on E, which means I need to spell up minor thirds. So let's see, what's a good way to do this? E. So we're going to move this A down to G, and then this C down to, well, let's move the C, down to a B flat, and then this E, actually, we don't want to take it down to a D flat here because of the augmented second. Normally, You wouldn't do that because of the augmented second, but when you're dealing with fully diminished seventh chords, that's kind of part of this surprising sound that they have, so it's okay. And now we're going to resolve this tritone G and D flat to A and C, and then this B flat is going to end up doubling the A. And now we're moving to this fully diminished seventh on C sharp, so spelling up minor thirds from that is going to be E, G, and a B flat. And again, this tritone is going to close in to the F and the A. And then, again, the same sort of progression, so a D sharp, minor third up is F sharp, minor third up is A. Oh, that's not an F sharp. So F sharp here, and then A and C. And then again, this is of course going to close in to G and B, and since this is a 5 chord, this is going to be a G sharp. And then we can resolve this back to A minor. So this is a typical progression with fully diminished seventh, secondary fully diminished seventh chords, embellishing what was originally just a simple diatonic 1, 6, 4, 5, 1 progression. Okay, let's look at some example problems. So a typical problem for secondary dominance would be asking for a secondary dominant of a provided chord. So there will be a given key and chord. So let's say we're in G and we have a 5 chord, so you would need to provide the secondary dominant to 5 and resolve it accordingly. So let's do that. So we'll write in the 5 chord here, which is of course D major. And the F sharp is in the key signature, so, and now we need 5 of 5. So that's going to be an A major chord, so A, E, A, and here's the accidental C sharp. And now we need to resolve it back to 5. So D, F sharp, A, D. For our second example, let's choose a different key. What about F major? And this time, let's say we are given a 4 chord, and we're asked to give us 5, 6, 5 of 4. So 5, 6, 5 of 4, back to 4. So the first thing we can do, well, need the key signature. The first thing we should do is figure out what the bass line is going to be. So since 5 of 4 would be a C chord, C dominant seventh, we know that the third of that chord is an E, and that's what's going to be in the bass since it's a first inversion seventh chord. And then move back to F here. And now we just need to make sure that we provide the upper voices and have the right notes. So we have an E, and here's a C that we can hold over, and then the F moves up to G, and the A moves up a half step to the seventh of the chord, the B flat. And now, of course, this is just going to resolve right back to where it was. So here's the 5, 6, 5 of 4. And for example 3, let's say we are given a few chords in a minor key, let's say, and asked to insert a secondary dominant somewhere. So just do a 1, 4, 5, 1 progression. So 1, 4, 5, 1. And so we can plan it out without writing in the upper voices first. So let's say we want to provide a, the choices are between 1 and 4, of course, and 4 and 5. So let's do 1 here, which would mean we're going to do 5 of 4. And let's make it 5, 6 of 4 just for fun. So now we can write in the new bass line. So this A is going to be the dominant of D, so it needs to be an A major chord. And since it's in first inversion, since we decided to use 5, 6 of 4, the third is going to be in the bass, so that's a C sharp. And then moving to 4, and then finishing the progression 5, 1. So can use this open voicing since we've got the third in the bass and we don't want to double a note that's going to be a leading tone. And now we'll move this to D minor, so A, D, F, and then our familiar 4 to 5 with contrary motion, so G sharp, B, E, and finally 5 to 1. And for the final example problem, let's say we're given a chord in a minor key, a 5 chord, and we're asked for a secondary leading tone chord. So we're in A. One part of this question is to make sure that you spell the 5 chord with the G sharp. And then we need this 7, fully diminished 7 of 5. So that's going to be, of course, D sharp, F sharp, A, C, and then resolve that back to 5. So the D sharp moves up to E, and the F sharp moves up to G sharp, and the A moves up to B, and the C moves down to B as well. All right, thanks for watching Educator.com's AP Music Theory course. See you next time.